Let's go to this conversation. The Democratic Alliance is calling for a full investigation into what it calls ANC cadre deployment appointments. At a press conference this morning, the party revealed results of its analysis of the ANC's deployment committee minutes, which it argues confirms that state capture continues unabated. The party says it will use this as the basis of a formal complaint to the Public Service Commission. Let's look at this now with Dr. Leon Schreiber from the DA, who is the Shadow Minister for Public Administration. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It is really worrying that independent entities like Chapter 9 institutions and others are possibly not as independent as one might think.
Yes, good afternoon. Indeed, it is very worrying. And what is really striking from an analysis of these minutes of meetings of the ANC's cadre deployment committee between the period of May 2018 and May 2021 is to see just how wide and deep the influence of this committee actually extends. So there are 88 different government entities, including courts, government departments, Chapter 9 institutions, state-owned entities, where appointments were influenced by the deployment committee over those 3 years. And we can also see from these minutes that the influence extends from the top right the way through the civil service. So you have people leading SOEs, for example, deployed by the committee, but the influence extends down even into middle management, where you have deputy director general positions being discussed and overseen by the ANC's cadre deployment committee. So for the first time really in 27 years, these minutes provide us with hard evidence of just how staggering the ANC's influence and capture of our public sector actually is. And that's why we're saying now is the opportunity for us to take action.
In some of the, if maybe even two or some of the entries, one can see a potential clear maybe linkage there. But looking at the statement that you released, I wonder how you were able to come to the conclusion that some of these entries are not, are suggesting what you've just said right now. I'm interested in one particular entry. Solima Baila was not able to attend the meeting. That's the entry. And it says, he sent through his apology. And then there's also a request to meet more regularly and consistently on set dates, also to discuss a broader deployment issues and not just names. I wonder, how do you prove such an entry to suggest that it actually talks about cadre deployment to some of these institutions?
Well, I mean, what you're referring to is one specific minute in this large batch of minutes that we have. So you're right that there's a request there for the committee to meet more regularly and to seemingly broaden its discussions. But what we can see from the minutes is that this committee is quite active. It meets about once a month on average. And almost the entirety of the conversation recorded in the minutes by the ANC revolve around deployment to particular positions. So we can also see that there are two mechanisms that this committee uses to actually deploy people. The first being, the obvious one where there's a specific name put forward. But then there's also a mechanism whereby certain positions, so for example, if you have a state-owned entity board where there may be 10 board members, the committee actually divides that and says the committee will take 5 of these positions and the minister can fill the other 5. So, the minutes, about 60 pages or so of them, is replete with instances and examples of 88 different state institutions to which the committee influenced appointments.
And I know that you say that you're going to be, laying a formal complaint with the Public Service Commission. But I mean, we're almost out of time. I wish we had a lot more time to talk about this. But I'd like to ask about a matter that I'm sure you are aware of. Journalists asked you about this a little earlier on. And I'm curious to even hear more from you. Bonginkosi Matigizela is set to return to politics. We've seen in reports and also some reports suggesting that he's going to accept the position as advisor to the Western Cape Premier Alan Winde. In April last year, Mr. Matigizela was found to have lied about his qualifications and his CV. He subsequently resigned from all positions within the party. I wonder what example this is setting. As much as you may not be talking about cadre deployment, but one may say that this is not really a good example that the DA is setting here because he was found to be dishonest.
So the appointment of political advisors is something that is explicitly addressed in Section 12A of the Public Service Act, whereby that is one of the exceptions to the rest of the Public Service Act, and where senior political leaders like premiers actually do have the space to decide who to appoint as political advisors. So the point here being that cadre deployment is a system, institutionalized system, where a party political committee comes together and in secret decides this is the person, and then issues an instruction, as we see in these minutes, to the minister or the premier to say this is the person to appoint. But in the case of political advisors, that is a position that is at the discretion of the premier or the minister. And in this case, the premier will be able to set out the process and the thinking that influences that appointment. But the key point is the DA does not have a cadre deployment committee. We do not get together to say you must appoint this person and that person as Director General. And that is what we now finally know the ANC has been doing likely for the past 27 years.
All right. I wish we had more time, because really it's very difficult to even understand as to why somebody who's dishonest would be put back into government. And as you say, that maybe the premier might be able to explain exactly what's going on here. But thank you so much for your time. That was Dr. Leon Schreiber, who's the DA Shadow Minister.